Hello, and welcome to a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video, where today I'm going to be completing the game with the duo of Mantine and Skarmory. And before getting this suggestion, I didn't realize that Skarmory and Mantine were actually in versions of each other. Skarmory having the higher defense and physical attack, whereas Mantine has the higher special attack and special defense. So that was interesting to find out. But anyway, with that, let's go ahead and get into their stats. Mantine has 65 HP, 40 attack, 70 defense, 80 special attack, 140 special defense, and 70 speed, and gets access to mostly normal and water type moves. However, it does get wing attack, which might come in handy, though it's extremely low physical attack. It makes me think that I probably won't go for it. On the TM side, it does get Ice Beam, which is really nice, and it even gets the move Earthquake, which is interesting, because even though it's not going to be doing all that much damage, because Skarmory is a flying type, it's going to be immune to it, so I might end up using it just because of that. Anyway, moving on to Skarmory, it has 65 HP, 80 attack, 140 defense, 40 special attack, 70 special defense, and 70 speed, and gets access to mostly normal and flying type moves, though it does get Steel Wing, but that's really about it for Skarmory. It doesn't really get any other better attacking moves, so maybe I'll have to rely on Hidden Power to get a bit more type coverage. But anyway, with that, let's go and move on to our Skarmory in particular, which has a naive nature, raising its speed but lowering its special defense. Definitely not incredible for it, but the extra speed will prevent any speed ties in the future, which I think will be very nice for it. It gets access to the Keen Eye ability, preventing my accuracy from being lowered, though it could have also had Sturdy, but Sturdy's not good in this generation. And at level 10, Skarmory has Leer, Peck, and Sand Attack. Now moving on to Mantine, who has a relaxed nature, raising its defense but lowering its speed. Definitely not a great nature for it, but the extra defense could help. It has the Swift Swim ability, which doubles its speed in the rain, though it could have also had Water Absorb, and by level 10 it gets Tackle, Bubble, and Supersonic. So with that, we move on to the game, and of course these two Pokemon obviously don't have too much issue in the early game. The only real thing is that because Mantine is using a move like Bubble, which is extremely weak, and on top of that, Bubble has one of the slowest animations in the game, which is definitely wasting a bit of time. And even though it doesn't really look all that slow here, I play the game at 2x speed, and then whenever I'm doing the editing on these videos, I double the battles. So it's effectively 4x the speed, and Bubble is still very present. Whereas most of the moves, Tackle does take a little while, but it also depends on the Pokemon's animations. Basically, what I'm getting at is that a lot of the battles take a long time because neither of these Pokemon hit especially hard at this point, and the moves that they do have take a little while to come out. So anyway, that's enough rambling on that for now. Now that we beat the old man, we can move on to the Power Rangers. I decided to fight Red because Houndour is a physical attacker, so if it hits Skarmory, it's not going to be doing that much damage. And I should be able to take out the Slugma pretty quickly, and a crit definitely helps. Bubble's not really doing all that much damage though. Ember actually takes Skarmory down to half, and of course it gets a burn. Skarmory gets taken down to 4, Peck does almost nothing now. Bubble is enough to take down Slugma, but unfortunately, Skarmory goes down to the burn. And Mantine is not a very physically defensive Pokemon, so it gets taken down very low. Bubble does do more damage now that the opponent is gone, but it's not enough, and Houndour takes it down. So I decided to move over to Brown. It's generally the easiest trainer, as long as you have super effective damage against Baltoy, and you're not a grass type, otherwise Hoot Hoot is an issue. But anyway, if you are enjoying this video, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Now, I don't want to bring them down before they even get their feet off the ground, but I do have a few worries about Skarmory in particular. When I used it in the Steel-type video, it really didn't contribute too much throughout the game, and so I'm a bit worried that the same is going to happen here. Though, I'm also really hoping it doesn't. At level 13, Skarmory gets Swift, and we're just about to beat Brown. Only another turn left. One last Swift to take it down. So with that, we get access into the Cypher base where Mantine gets Bubble Beam, and we get to the battle against Sabrina. She leads with a Love Disc and a Beautifly, and I go for Peck into Beautifly and Bubble Beam. And Peck is doing over half. It hits a Gust, not really doing that much to Mantine. Go for Bubble Beam, which takes it down. And then she sends out her Roselia, which is always a bit of a threat because it likes to set up Leaf Seed, which once it goes down will go to the Delcatty. And unfortunately, Peck doesn't take it down in a single turn, so it's able to do that. And Bubble Beam really doesn't do that much to it either. So another Peck and Bubble Beam, which takes down the Roselia, bringing out her final Pokemon, the Shadow Delcatty. Bubble Beam hits it, doing about a quarter of its health, which is very nice. However, the Leaf Seed does heal it up a bit. Go for a Peck and Bubble Beam into it again. taking it down to low yellow with a crit, and Bubble Beam is enough to take it down. So that very lucky crit did save me a bit of time. Go for Swift, not really doing that much to Love Disc, and Bubble Beam takes it down to half. It's not able to do anything at this point, so another Swift and Bubble Beam finish it off, and we beat Laverna on the first attempt. Now, of course, you can't have a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video without the obligatory Mirror B. How are you doing today, Mirror B? Well, as always, it's good to see you. And soon after, Mantine gets the move Takedown, which I decide to teach over Tackle, and then I go to the Real Gam Tower to go pick up my two favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect, and I'm going to go ahead and teach Hidden Power to both, which Mantine has Hidden Power Electric at 50 base power, which is honestly pretty decent. And Skarmory has Hidden Power Ghost at 39 base power. And while it's not the best hidden power type in the game, it is at least a physical move, so Skarmory could use it if need be. However, I'm not actually sure how long I'm going to keep it. But anyway, with that, soon after, I go ahead and pick up the Swinub for the Never Melt Ice item to raise Ice type damage by 10%. And of course, following that, I teach Ice Beam to Mantine over Supersonic before catching the Seal. No, I actually wasn't really planning on catching the Seal, but it is holding the Mystic Water item, and I got it to low enough health where it could be worthwhile. Anyway, with that, we move on to the battle against Snattle. He lives with Quagsire and a Lantern. And unfortunately, I don't really have anything great here to deal with either of them. I go for Swift, dealing almost nothing to both. And Bubble Beam doesn't really do that much to Lantern either. Though in hindsight, I really should have been going for Hidden Power Electric into Lantern because it is at least neutral. But I go for Ice Beam. Maybe I could get a freeze. I don't. Shockwave nearly takes down Skarmory. Rock Tomb takes down Mantine. And all that's left is the Skarmory, which of course isn't going to last too much longer. And I go for one last move before going down to Shockwave. Now, I do still have the Seal in my party because I just caught it before this battle, so I do need to wait for it to go down. But after I lose, I decide to go over to the Tutor Lady and teach Body Slam to Mantine. I would have preferred to teach it to Skarmory, but unfortunately it doesn't get Body Slam. So I go back in for a second attempt. I go for Hidden Power, still not doing that much to Lantern, but Body Slam also really isn't doing that much to Lantern either. Okay, well, that's not great. And at this point, I still haven't realized that I should be going for Hidden Power. I think I just forgot. And despite this, I don't think Hidden Power is actually the answer here because it would still take a few turns to take Lantern down, and in that time it would be doing a ton of damage with Shockwave to both of my Pokemon, so after losing once again, I decided to go ahead and do a bit of training over at Mount Battle, where at level 29, Skarmory gets Air Cutter, which I decide to teach over Leer, and at level 32, it gets Steel Wing, which I teach over Peck. And then I go into the battle once again, this time realizing that Hidden Power is an option. Now unfortunately Lantern does resist Air Cutter, but with a crit on Quagsire it does actually do quite a lot. And unfortunately Hidden Power really isn't doing that much to Lantern either, as I suspected, but it is doing a little better. Shockwave still takes Mantine down to half even with the extra levels, and Rock Tomb does quite a bit as well. I go for Swift, luckily getting a crit on Lantern, but still not enough to take it down. Skarmory gets taken down to red. I finish off the Lantern, bringing out his Shadow Lunatone, and for some reason I decide to go for Air Cutter and Bubble Beam into it when I have Steel Wing that's super effective. But it actually ends up working out in my favor because it chips it down just far enough for Bubble Beam to take it down in a single hit. So it was accidental genius in that moment. Out comes Cast Form, Mantine gets taken down very low and the Fruity Pebbles don't help. And unfortunately, there's no way for me to take down the last three Pokemon, so I go ahead and try for as much experience as I can. Go for Air Cutter, taking down a Quagsire. Out comes Matang. Shockwave takes down Mantine. And then all that's left is my Skarmory. And at 10 HP, I can probably finish off the Cast Form with a crit, but Matang takes us down. So with that, I decide to go back over to Mount Battle and fight through Area 4 to go pick up the move Facade, which I decide to teach to Skarmory over Hidden Power. Now the thing about Facade is that whenever you are poisoned, paralyzed, or burned, it doubles the power of Facade, making it a 140 base power move, which I think is going to allow us to break through the wall that is Lantern. Now unfortunately, because Skarmory is a steel type, I don't think there's any way for it to get poisoned, so that only leaves getting burned or paralyzed, and because I don't want my speed quartered, I go ahead and go for the burn, which leads me to waiting for the Slugma to eventually decide to burn Skarmory, and once it does, I go back into the battle against Snattle, and I go for Facade, doing less damage than I expected into Lantern. And unfortunately, I lose that battle, and I lose again, and again, and again, and again, and so on, until eventually I start to think that maybe I don't understand how Facade works. And I go ahead and look it up, and I realize that while Facade is working as intended, the burn is actually having its damage, which I didn't consider because usually you run Facade with Guts Pokemon, and whenever they have a status ailment, it doubles their attack stat. So all I was effectively doing with Skarmory was having my attack and having Facade go up to 70 base power again, which was achieving nothing, and I was constantly burned and losing HP. So after those 7 wasted attempts, I go back into the battle this time without the burn, and of course on this attempt I get frozen, but despite that, this is the winning attempt. I'm able to take down the Castform, bringing out his final Pokemon, the Mantine, and the Quagsire hits a Rock Tomb. Skarmory hangs on with the Focus Band. It's a 10% chance to work, so that's quite nice. Go for Ice Beam, taking Quagsire below half, and Facade finishes it off, and that just leaves the Mantine. Thunder Punch does a lot of damage to Mantine, but it's not enough. I go for Steel Wing and Bubble Beam, and as long as Steel Wing doesn't miss, I think I'm fine. It doesn't, and I take down the Mantine. So moving on, I Deech Protect to Mantine before this next boss fight, and I run into another Mantine. Hello, other Mantine. Goodbye, other Mantine. And then we go into the battle against Gonzap. He leads with an Electrode and a Nuzleaf, and on the first turn, the Nuzleaf is going to go for Fake Out, and the Electrode should be going for Spark, which it decides to go for Spark into Skarmory, which is a bit unfortunate. I go for Air Cutter, getting a crit on the Electrode and taking down the Nuzleaf in a single hit. He then sends out his Vileplume. I go for another Air Cutter, which takes Electrode nearly down to half, and I get a crit on Vileplume, nearly taking it down in a single hit. Then out comes Whiscash. Vileplume uses Sleep Powder, putting Mantine to sleep, which is not great, but I can use Call to wake it up the following turn. I go for Air Cutter once again, which finishes off the Vileplume, and then he sends out his own Skarmory. Hello there, other Skarmory. Mantine gets hit by a Rock Tomb, lowering its speed, but hopefully it's still faster than the opposing Skarmory. I go for Ice Beam into the other Skarmory, which it just goes for Hyper Beam, not taking my own Skarmory down. Bubble Beam takes Skarmory below half, and unfortunately my Skarmory gets taken down by Spark from the Whiscash, but because the Skarmory is charging this turn, I can take down the Whiscash, and unfortunately I get outsped by his Skarmory and it takes me down. But going back into the battle once again at full health, this battle was not very hard whatsoever, and I'm able to take him down very easily on the second attempt. Now moving on to Gorgon, he leads with a Lairon and a Celio. I go for Steel Wing and Body Slam into the Celio, taking it down with a crit and a single hit with Steel Wing, which is very nice. Out comes the Slowking, Body Slam hits it. Not really doing too much damage though. I go for Facade Body Slam once again, which takes it down to low red. Luckily the Lairon has missed 2 takedowns. I go for a Facade to finish it off, and then out comes Ursaring. I go for Bubble Beam into it, taking it down to yellow. Iron Tail hits, not really doing that much damage though. Go for another Steel Wing, which takes down the Ursaring, and then he sends out his first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Primeape. And Bubble Beam hits it, taking it down below half health. So I should be able to take down the Primeape with another Steel Wing, and go for Bubble Beam into his next Pokemon, the Shadow Hypno. And while I do think Hypno is definitely a bit of an issue for Skarmory, Mantine can definitely handle it, and a crit definitely guarantees that I can take it down on this next turn with not too much issue. I get an attack boost, Bubble Beam takes down the Lairon, and I beat Gorgon on the first attempt. So now moving on to the final area of the game, and after my catastrophic blunder at Snaddle, they are unfortunately not going there with a great time. On the shore of Citydark Isle, I go ahead and teach Earthquake to Mantine over Body Slam, and then I run into another Mantine. Hello, other Mantine. Goodbye, other Mantine. Now moving on to the battle against Lovrina, she leads with a Gardevoir and a Gorbis, and I go for Steel Wing into Gardevoir, hoping to take it down in a single hit. Unfortunately, it does survive, but Ice Beam finishes it off. Then out comes Roselia. Gorbis goes for Attract into Mantine, so I want to take it down as quick as possible. So I go for Facade, not really doing that much damage, and Earthquake, which does a lot to Roselia, but not quite enough to finish off the Gorbis, though I should be able to finish it off on this turn with another Facade. And with Gorbis being gone, I know for a fact that Mantine will be able to attack again, and I really want to get rid of this Farfetch'd as soon as possible, so I go for Ice Beam into it, taking it down in a single hit, and then that just leaves her Shadow Altaria, which is 4 times weak to ice, so I'm not worried about Mantine taking it down, and so I decide to use Air Cutter, take Roselia down, And unfortunately, Altaria does outspeed, though it really doesn't do that much to Mantine before it takes it down with an Ice Beam. So with that, Levering is defeated, and at level 45, Skarmory gets the move Metal Sound, which lowers a Pokemon special defense by 2 stages, so I decide to teach that over Swift, and I run into yet another Mantine. Hello, other Mantine. Goodbye, other Mantine. And just after that, we run into another Skarmory. Hello, other Skarmory. Goodbye, other Skarmory. Anyway, now at the top of the volcano, we run into Snettle once again. He leads with a Quagsire and a Metang, and I try to go for Metal Sound to lower Metang's special defense, but I completely forget that it has the Clear Body ability, which just prevents all stat reductions, so definitely a misplay on that one. I go for Air Cutter, not really doing much to either, and Bubble Beam takes Metang down to low yellow. It hits a Thunder Punch, doing actually less than I expected to Mantine. And unfortunately, Quagsire is going for Body Slam, so I really want to get rid of it as well, because I really don't want to be paralyzed. So once the Scizor comes out, I use Ice Beam, takes Quagsire down to low yellow, and unfortunately, Mantine gets paralyzed. So I go for Bubble Beam into Scizor, and go for another Air Cutter, because it is at least neutral to Scizor. Waterfall, not really doing that much damage. Bubble Beam takes Scizor down to low red, and I go for another Air Cutter, which unfortunately misses the Scizor. And the reason that's bad is because I wanted to use Bubble Beam to hit the Soul Rock coming out, but unfortunately because the Scizor survived, instead I'm attacking Scizor, which then brings out the Cast Form. And I've done no damage to the Soul Rock. I go for Steel Wing into Cast Form, not enough to take it down, it hits a Flamethrower. Soul Rock goes for Shadow Sky, Bubble Beam takes it down, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Starmie, which at this point might actually be kind of threatening because both of my Pokemon are getting pretty low, and Mantine is paralyzed. I go for Protect and Air Cutter, which takes down the Cast Form, deals a little bit of damage to Starmie. It uses Shadow Storm, taking Skarmory down to 10 HP, and unfortunately, neither of my Pokemon are strong enough at this point to survive another attack. So I just go for Facade, hoping that maybe I might get a crit, but it really doesn't do that much damage, and Skarmory and Mantine are finished off. Now, despite some bad execution, I do think that the ideas in the first battle do help quite a lot. I decided to go for Metal Sound into Quagsire this time, that way I can guarantee it goes down in a single hit. And because I'm actually more fearful of the paralysis from Thunder Punch than I am Scizor, I decided to go ahead and take down Metang next, go for Steel Wing and Bubble Beam, which takes it down to low red, so it does have one last opportunity to hit a paralysis, but luckily it doesn't. I finish it off with another Steel Wing, and then out comes the Shadow Soul Rock once again, but I know for a fact it goes down to a single Bubble Beam, so it goes down right away. The crit is nice though, just in case it was at range. Then out comes Cast Form. I go for Steel Wing and Bubble Beam into it to take it down in a single turn because it does have that Flamethrower and I believe Thunderbolt as well. And then out comes his final Pokemon once again, that Shadow Starmie. And even though Mantine doesn't have any effective moves against it, it at least has Earthquake, which does deal damage to the Scizor as well. Unfortunately, it's not quite enough to finish off Starmie, so I do have to use one last move. Starmie just decides to go for Shadow Break though, so I can take it down without taking any damage, and then all that's left is the Scizor, which does get a defense boost, but it really doesn't matter too much. Air Cutter takes it down to low yellow, and Bubble Beam finishes it off. So after Greevil's defeated, I go ahead and teach Rain Dance to Mantine over Earthquake, and then I go into the battle against Ardos. He leads with a Shadow Swallow and Alakazam, and I go for Rain Dance on the first turn because Swallow is usually going to set up Shadow Sky, which luckily it did. I'm able to outspeed and take down the Alakazam with Steel Wing, and now that I have the Rain active, I outspeed everything on the field with Mantine. Now, in hindsight, I probably should have gone for Ice Beam to take down Swallow because as soon as it gets the chance, it is just going to set up Shadow Sky again, meaning that it will outspeed once again. And even though I did get a decent amount of damage on Kingdra, it's not actually the bigger threat here, so this was definitely a bad play, but it is the first attempt, so it's not that bad. Anyway, Skarmory gets taken down to 6 after a Shadow Break, and unfortunately misses the Swallow. It goes down to another Hydro Pump, which is rain boosted now as well. That is a problem with Kingdra. I take down the Swallow, and then out comes Heracross. It uses Double Edge, not really doing too much damage. I go for Bubble Beam into the Heracross with the extra rain damage. It is doing quite a bit, but unfortunately not enough to take it down in a single hit. It hits a Rock Tomb, taking me down to 25, lowering my speed, and unfortunately I'm slower than the Swift Swim Kingdra, so that's not great. Anyway, I decide to teach Protect to Skarmory after that loss, and then I go back in once again. Now for attempt number 4, because I definitely made a few mistakes throughout this battle. Now, I set up Rain Dance on the first turn just as before, that way I can outspeed, and this time I do take down the Swallow right away, but at the same time I use Protect with Skarmory, that way it's not going to take the Rain Boosted Hydro Pump from the Kingdra, and I can focus all my attention on taking it down this following turn. Luckily, it does actually miss, and I'm able to hit Heracross with a 4 times effective Air Cutter, though it's not enough to take it down. I go for Ice Beam to finish off the Kingdra, and I go for another Air Cutter to start dealing damage to the Shadow Electabuzz. And as long as it doesn't miss, which it luckily doesn't, I'm able to take down Heracross. And I get a crit into Electabuzz, which is nice. Then out comes the final Pokemon, a Shadow Snorlax, and hopefully Electabuzz is going to play nice, because usually it should be going for Shadow Mist here, which it decides to do. I go for Steel Wing into Snorlax, really not doing that much damage. The rain ends, so Mantine no longer has a speed advantage over Electabuzz, so while it is a bit risky, I decide to set up Rain Dance once again. I go for another Steel Wing, taking Snorlax down to below half, and it hits Shadow End into Mantine. Luckily, it doesn't take it down in a single hit though, so I am able to finish it off with another Bubble Beam, and then all that's left is the Electabuzz, which goes for one last Shadow Mist. I go for Steel Wing, taking it down below half, and then all that's left is the Mantine to hit one last Bubble Beam to finish it off. So not too bad with Ardos. Moving on to Gorgon, he leads with a Slowking and an Ursaring. I go for Air Cutter right away, not really doing that much damage to Slowking or Ursaring. I set up Rain Dance. Slowking hits an Ice Beam, doing a little bit to Skarmory. I go for another Air Cutter and Bubble Beam to take down the Ursaring. And then out comes Aggron, which is 4 times resistant to Air Cutter, so when it hits it, it does nothing at all. Water Pulse into Skarmory, luckily no confusion. I go for a Bubble Beam, which does quite a bit to Slowking, and another Air Cutter with a crit finishes off the Slowking, and then he sends out Walrein. Aggron uses Iron Tail, not really doing that much damage to Skarmory. Go for Bubble Beam into the Aggron to take it down, sending out his first Shadow Pokemon, the Shadow Poliwrath. And I want to get rid of it as soon as possible, so I go for Air Cutter, and that is doing much less damage than I expected into it. So I decide to lower its special defense, but I accidentally forget that the rain is going, so Mantine is going to attack first, doing almost nothing with Ice Beam. And then I'll lower its special defense, though this might still help in the long run. Waterfall gets a crit, taking Skarmory down, which is very unfortunate. And at this point, with 2 bulky water types and a Poliwrath that has a 50% chance to have Water Absorb, Mantine just has no way to take them down. So unfortunately, it gets taken down fairly quickly. So going back into the battle once again, and the plan is pretty simple, just leave Aggron alive, and I can take down Walrein and all the Pokemon after with relative ease. So I go for Bubble Beam and Steel Wing, taking it down to low yellow. It hits Waterfall, doing a ton of damage to Skarmory, and Mantine goes down in this attempt to a Double Edge. So I'm not sure if this is really the way forward either. So after another loss, I decide to go ahead to Mount Battle to do a bit of extra training, and at the same time I can pick up a TM for Skarmory, which should help a lot against the Poliwrath. And that TM is Aerial Ace, which is the next floor and not the one I just completed. But anyway, there is actually an option that I completely forgot about, and that's Mantine having Hidden Power. Now that's the problem with doing these videos over multiple days, is sometimes I just forget what the Hidden Power type is. So now that I have Hidden Power Electric, these last few Pokemon actually aren't that big of threats as they were before, so I go for Hidden Power. It's not doing a lot to Poliwrath, but it's at least better than Ice Beam was doing. He sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Mr. Mime, and the Shadow Poliwrath is able to set up Shadow Sky. So I go for Rain Dance and Air Cutter, which Air Cutter takes down Poliwrath and does a little bit of damage to Mr. Mime. It hits a Shadow Storm, finishing off Skarmory. But once the Rain Dance is started, Mr. Mime has no way of setting it up once again. Go for Bubble Beam, finishing off in a single hit. Now moving on to Eldest, he leads with a Shadow Manectric and Ninjask, and I go ahead and set up Rain Dance on the first turn, and because Skarmory can't really do much here, I decide to just go ahead and go for Air Cutter, just in case the Ninjask decided not to protect that turn. But I go for Steel Wing, which, after the Manectric goes down, is able to hit his next Pokemon, the Shadow Salamence. But it doesn't really matter too much because the Salamence should go down to a single Ice Beam anyway, but it does guarantee that it does go down, just in case for some reason it was a range. But Salamence goes down, out comes Flygon, and then I go for another Ice Beam, which should take it down in a single hit, and then he sends out his next Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Marowak, and Marowak is actually kind of dangerous because of the Thick Club item. though I don't think it'll have a chance to use it because with Bubble Beam I should be able to finish it off in a single hit. And then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Lapras, and on the first turn the Lapras always likes to set up Shadow Sky, so it's not going to be an issue right off the bat. And because of that, I'm actually going to go for Air Cutter to take down the Ninjask, and then a Hidden Power Electric to deal a little bit of damage to the Lapras. And with that, I should be able to finish it off on the following turn, but not before it sets up Shadow Sky, which does waste a little bit of time. But after one last Steel Wing and Hidden Power Electric, it goes down, and we beat Eldest on the first attempt. So now moving on to the big box legendary, Shadowlugia, and I actually have a plan to taking it down fairly quickly. I decided to go for Metal Sound right away to lower its special defense by 2 stages, and I set up the rain, that way Mantine can outspeed and hit it with Ice Beam before it's able to attack on the following turn. So Ice Beam takes it down to low yellow, and Steel Wing unfortunately doesn't finish it off. So Mantine gets taken down to 23 HP, but I am able to finish it off on the following turn. So with that, we move on to the battle against Greevil. He leads with a Shadow Rhydon and Moltres, and I go for Rain Dance and Protect on the first turn, and luckily both of his Pokemon decide to attack the protecting Skarmory, and because this is a first attempt, I just want to see how much damage I'm doing to Pokemon. I go for Bubble Beam, which does take down Moltres in the rain. He sends out Executor, and then I go for Steel Wing to see how much it does to Rhydon, and it's looking to do over half, so once Rhydon hits any of my Pokemon once, I can take it down. I go for Ice Beam, which isn't quite enough to finish off Executor in a single hit. I take down the Rhydon, sending out his Tauros, and with its Intimidating ability, it lowers our attack. And unfortunately, Executor is going for Shadow Storm, which is something I really don't like to see. I go for Air Cutter to take it down, and then he sends out Articuno. And unfortunately, with my attack lowered, there's no real way for me to take it down. So I go for a Steel Wing just to see how much I do, and that's actually doing much more damage than I expected. It hits a Shadow Chill, taking me down to 27, and unfortunately I go down this following turn to a Shadow Rush. So let's go ahead and get back in there and try it again. This time I want to see if Bubble Beam can take down Moltres in a single hit without the rain, and unfortunately it can't, though it does get pretty close. And Rhydon uses Shadow Panic, which is something I really don't want to see. So we go ahead and move on to the third attempt now, where right away I set up Rain Dance just like the first attempt, and luckily they both decide to attack Protect once again. I go for Steel Wing into Rhydon and Bubble Beam to take down the Moltres in a single hit. And then out comes the Executor, and unfortunately I still am not able to take it down in a single hit. Rhydon is luckily going for Shadow Hold this turn instead of going straight for Shadow Panic. Go for Ice Beam to take the Executor down pretty low and finish off the Rhydon. Though because the Shadow Hold was out, there is a chance that Executor is going to go for Shadow Storm. Luckily it's just going for Shadow End, though I really don't expect it to stay that way for long, so I decide to take it down now. And then out comes the Articuno once again. And I go for Steel Wing into Articuno, taking it down to nearly half. Shadow Sky gets set up, so Mantine no longer has a speed advantage. I go for Protect and Rain Dance once again. Shadow Hold, which stalls Tauros another turn, and luckily it decided to go for Shadow Chill into Skarmory. I go for a Bubble Beam into Articuno, taking it down to low red, and an Air Cutter doesn't take down Articuno. Okay, well that's definitely not great, though luckily it did just decide to go for Shadow Sky just like Tauros did. But because I wasn't able to take down the Articuno in a single hit, I do need to set up the Rain Dance once again, and unfortunately they call my bluff and they double into Mantine, which is very unfortunate. I go for Bubble Beam, which takes Tauros down, and then I go for Air Cutter to finish off the Articuno, which as long as it doesn't miss, I'm fine, which it doesn't, and then all that's left is the Zapdos. And because Skarmory can't really do much here, and I don't think Mantine can one-shot, I go for Metal Sound to lower its special defense, and luckily it just decided to attack Mantine, and I accidentally misclick using Protect once again, though luckily, once again, Protect comes out. It's only a 50-50 chance after the first one, and Zapdos goes down to Ice Beam. So, very nearly messed up at the end there, but we're able to get past it, and now we can finally say how they did. They beat the game at a time of 12 hours, 27 minutes, and 54 seconds, with Mantine at level 59 and Skarmory at level 58. And they fainted 30 times throughout the game, 23 of those to bosses, and 7 of those to random trainers. And honestly, those stats are extremely skewed by the fact that I made a lot of mistakes this run. From just messing up how Facade works, and forgetting about Hidden Power, and definitely a bunch of other little things. I did an exceptionally bad job, so unfortunately they do find themselves in the B tier for this video. But whenever I get around to doing reruns on the Pokemon that I feel I made big mistakes with, this is definitely going to be top of the list. Now, I do find this to be very frustrating because I know for a fact some of the Pokemon that people suggest are their favorite Pokemon, and when I make decisions that cause the Pokemon to do poorly, it's a bit of a letdown. But at the same time, I already did the run, and I really need to get on to the next video, so unfortunately they will stay here for a bit, but once I get back to them, I will be able to fix the mistakes I made, and hopefully give them a much better time. So with that, if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing. If you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and bye!